If you're growing a vegetable garden and you want to make the most of your space, and let's be honest, who doesn't? You want to watch this video. This is my complete guide to growing vertically. In essence, using trellises in order to maximize your garden space. I've been using trellises for years and it's made a huge difference in the production, the health, and also the beauty of my gardens. So let's talk about why you want to add trellises to your garden space. First things first, they're going to make gardening so much more productive out of any given space. So when you add a trellis to your garden, what you're doing is simply making the most of each and every square inch, because you're going to take the plants that typically would vine out and cover the entirety of the base of your soil in your garden. You're going to take those plants up to the sky instead. There are three kinds of trellises that we like to use at Gardenary. Right now, I'm working on an arch trellis. I love to use arch trellises to connect two raised beds together. I've seen some people take an arch trellis and put it right in the middle of a bed. I wouldn't do that. You're going to lose almost all of your growing space right underneath that arch, and that's really not the point of a trellis. But by using a trellis this way, the way we love to do at Gardenary between two beds, you literally create a brand new growing space in the air. So instead of growing all our food right here in the bed itself, we, by the end of this season, will have vining plants covering the entirety of this arch. There are two other kinds of trellises we love to use at Gardenary. The next is an obelisk trellis. The obelisk is like a teepee and it's great to grow right in the center of the bed. So if you've got just one garden or a square shaped garden, put an obelisk right in the middle and you can plant all around it. The final kind of trellis that I love to grow on is a panel trellis. Panel trellis is going to be nice and flat like a fence. And you put it at the back of a garden bed. So if I'm growing a garden along a driveway, along a fence, along my house, I like to use panel trellises, especially in border gardens, where I can only get to the garden from one side. A panel trellis is great to put at the back of that garden. You can grow loads of vining plants up that panel and then reach in, harvest, tend, and grab those plants whenever you're ready. So those are the three types of trellises we like to use in the garden. Now let's talk about the reasons you want to use trellises beyond just saving space. So when you add a trellis to the garden, you are getting your plants off the soil and you're going to be protecting them health-wise as well. Anytime any part of your plant is touching the soil, it vastly increases the likelihood that you're going to have a pest problem, because you've literally created a road for pests to come from the soil up onto your plants. Growing plants on a trellis also increases the sunlight exposure. In a lot of our clients' gardens, we're working in places where sunlight is precious. And so with a trellis, you really maximize the sun you get on your garden space. And you can come in and prune the plants each and every week. I like to prune the lower leaves. And what this does is just open up the plant to get more sunlight on its flowers, on its leaves, and to make the most of the sun that's shining in any given space. So here we've got tomatoes growing on this obelisk trellis, and it reminds me of a thing I gotta tell you. Trellises need to be tall. So these vining plants, they can grow literally forever. This tomato is an indeterminate tomato, and this means it will keep growing all season long until frost stops it. So the last thing you want to do is get a tiny little trellis. You want your trellis to be at least 6 feet tall, and you want it to be strong. So you want to get the strongest trellis you can afford. I love to use steel trellises, iron trellises, metal trellises, because I know they're going to hold up for many years in the garden. If you do use a wood trellis, you just want to be sure that you get it really nice and anchored in the soil so it doesn't plop over and fall over when a big storm comes, or when it gets way overburdened with all that fruit that you're growing on it. When you put the trellis into the ground, you want to be sure you get the trellis really nice and settled into the soil. I like to push all of our trellises about 1 foot deep into the soil. That ensures that it's got lots of ground around it to be sure it doesn't move. Once your trellises are installed, all you got to do is plant your plants or your seeds right on the outside of it. You don't want to plant on the inside of the trellis, because our whole goal with this trellis is to increase airflow, to increase and maximize the sun we get on our plants, and to make tending super easy. It also maximizes the amount of plants I can fit on one trellis. Once you've got your plants on the trellis, you've really only got 2 jobs to do. One is to prune and the other is to tie. So I make it a weekly job to come out to the garden with my pruners and with some twine. I do a little bit of cutting and then I make sure that I've supported the plant all the way to the top of the trellis. Once you've tied your plants to the trellis each and every week, it's time to do a little bit of pruning. So I start at the base and I prune away any unhealthy leaves. So anything that's yellowing, turning brown, got holes in it, those leaves need to go. That's the first step of pruning. The next step of pruning is going to be pruning away anything that's additional, that's extra, that's not going to be contributing to the fruit of the plant. So when it comes to my pea plants, I've got some of these offshoots that I know probably aren't gonna have time to create fruit for me before the end of the season. So I'll just come in here and cut off these offshoots just like this so that I can get my plant to finish up and to finish up all those peas that are already on the vine. When it comes to my tomato plants, I like to keep the suckers. I know you'll have to watch a video about that right here. I like to keep the suckers, but I do love to prune the stems like this that are just producing leaves right along the main stem. So I'll do pruning first to clean away old leaves, and then next to prune away things that are non-fruiting so I can make the most of this space and get as much fruit off these vines as possible, as quickly as possible. So are you convinced? Vertical gardening is absolutely possible and so necessary if you want to make the most of your space in your garden, if you want to have really healthy plants, and if you want it to be absolutely beautiful. I started growing with trellises way back when, and the simplest trellises I used were made with bamboo canes and some nets. We literally drew up a net. I guess now I'd call it a panel trellis, but we took a big piece of net and used it to grow all of our cucumbers. Those kinds of trellises, those kinds of vertical gardening, they still worked. They got our plants up and off the soil, made the most of our space, and gave us lots and lots of harvest. So you can start simply that way with some bamboo poles and some netting. And then eventually when you're ready, you can advance to Gardenary style, use our trellises, arches, and panels and obelisks like these. You can make it as fancy or as plain as you need to, but no matter how you set it up, you've got to grow vertically. Speaking of growing vertically, I've got an entire video series all about growing tomatoes on an arch trellis. So you're gonna wanna watch that right after this video. You can start it right here. It shows you how many tomato plants to put on each side of the trellis, how to prune and tend them, how to harvest them and finish off the season when they're completely done. And if you want help to know when to plant all these things so you can grow vertically, go to gardenary.com/calendar. We have an amazing calendar where you put in 2 dates. We'll tell you all the rest of the dates for the rest of the year so you know when to plant your peas, your tomatoes, and all these other fantastic plants too. Thanks so much for being part of Gardenary. It means the world to us. I cannot wait to see the tomatoes, the beans, the peas, all the stuff you grow vertically in the seasons to come. And I'll see you next time.